Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to Where Venture Thrives, unlocking the factors behind high-performance startup ecosystems. My name is Colin Mahan, and I'm a director of high growth impact entrepreneurs and head of sponsorships at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center. And for those of you who may not know, the Nasdaq Center is a nonprofit improving access and knowledge in entrepreneurship to advance economic progress for all. As you're going to see in the chat in just a moment, the NASDAQ Center provides programs, resources, and exceptional mentorship to help entrepreneurs fuel prosperity, no matter where their journey begins. Be sure to check out those links and resources shared in the chat. Now we're going to launch a few polls to take a step back and take a temperature gauge on how all of you are doing today. We use this information to guide the programs we provide for this global community of entrepreneurs. Alrighty. So, the first one. How are you feeling about your business? Are you optimistic? Survival mode? Let us know. Also, if there are specific topics or challenges you'd like us to create resources for, feel free to share them in the chat. Now, a few more items before we get started. Firstly, we'd love to hear where you're coming from. So if you're comfortable, dial in. Oh, we've already got one where you're dialing in from in the chat. Washington, Wichita, LA, Maryland, welcome. Indianapolis, San Francisco, Central Missouri. All right, California, Atlanta, Georgia. Love it. Welcome, everyone. A lot of time zones involved. Great to see it, and thank you all for coming. And secondly, we're going to have live Q&A near the end of this session, so please feel free to submit those questions for us at any time using that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll do our best to get to them all. Now, while you're answering these final polls, we'd love to take a moment to recognize the incredible support of our corporate partners. The work that we do at the center wouldn't be possible without all the generosity and belief of our partners and funders, including Nasdaq, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, KPMG, Walmart, the Asian Innovation Hub, Wilson Sonsini, the Nareed Foundation, KKR, and BPM. We're deeply grateful for their partnership and hope you'll share us in that appreciation as well. So this poll's almost finished. We've got some Jersey and Chicago in the house. Love to see it. So without any further delay, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our special guests. Up first, we have our CEO, founding executive director at the Nasdaq Entrepreneurial Center, Nicola Corzine. We've got Beto Yars, the Seattle office director of economic development. We've got Carly Kisser, who's the JP Morgan Chase, and Earl Valencia, who's an author, startup mindsets, and also a Milestone Makers graduate. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you so much, Colin, and thank you all for joining us today. This is going to be an incredible session, and I am so looking forward to getting started. But before we get going with that session, I want to take a moment to recognize the collaboration of one of our other dear partners that made this program possible today, and that is our friendship with the National League of Cities. I'm going to invite Corianne Rice to join me in just a second to share a little bit about the amazing work that NLC leads and also why this topic is so near and dear to their hearts. Corey, welcome. Lovely to see you. Please share just a little bit about NLC, if you will.
Yes, thank you so much, Nicola, and it's great to be here with everybody. As Nicola mentioned, I'm Corianne Rice, and I'm here alongside with my colleague Safaya Fauzi, and we are here to represent the National League of Cities. NLC is the oldest and the largest organization that represents cities, towns, and villages across the United States, and it is our mission to relentlessly advocate for and protect the interests of municipalities by influencing federal policy, strengthening local leadership, and driving innovative solutions. Safaya and I sit on the entrepreneurship and economic development team within NLC, and we hope to help cities build adaptive, enduring economies that serve everybody, both in times of growth, but in moments of disruption. So that's one of the reasons why we're super excited to be here today. We're thrilled to be here amongst and have so many of you joining us, whether you're a familiar face from our NLC network or a new voice that we're connecting with for the first time. We're genuinely here to learn alongside of you and so honored to be here. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It has just been such a treat to get to know you and work with you over the last many months, and we know it's just going to be the beginning. And those words that you shared during economies could not perhaps be a better landscape from which we're going to be hosting this conversation today. Fortunately, we are joined by three amazing experts who will be telling us a little bit more about what we see unfolding in the great Seattle region that is inspiring the innovation economies in really big and bold ways. First, let me take just a moment to say how and why is the Nasdaq Center focused on this market? Because it is truly an inspiring story built by many great founders, many great leaders, incredible service providers, and champions of entrepreneurs in the biggest of ways. That story starts 5 years ago when we came up with a very big question that said, knowing founders build in the hardest of times and in the most meaningful of ways, how does place and space make that possible for them? And what if the place that they're actually building might be one of the biggest and underestimated business defensibility systems of all entrepreneurs? And that got us really curious to say, well, where is innovation unfolding in America in ways that we might not always be hearing about? I think we don't need to talk about it on this call, but the coasts get a lot of love. And we wanted to see and knew that entrepreneurs were building incredible companies, enduring companies in really big ways in many different places. Over the last 5 years, with incredible collaborations like Heartland Forward, Penn State University, and a number of others, we started to dig into seeing what regions were actually creating faster, more vibrant economies that were pulling everyone forward. And Seattle, no surprise, rose to the top. So today's conversation is really interesting to be able to lean in a little bit more to say, how might all of us here today hopefully leave with one or two new tidbits, new strategies, new ideas that can continue to fuel all of our regions? Because talent is truly equally distributed across the United States. And I think now more than ever, we have a way and a role in which we want to lean in and perhaps do more with less. So on that note, I hope you'll join me in welcoming an incredible panel today. You've heard a little bit about them from the background. I'm going to invite them to share what really brings them to this conversation and the first question that we tee up. And again, we're all here in support of you, so please make sure you're friendly with that Q&A function or your chat. Put in the questions that you'd like us to focus in, and we'll try to get to just as many of those as possible. But let's start with sort of a background question, if you can. I want to invite all of you, and we're going to start with Earl, and then we'll move to Carly, and then over to Beto, please. From where each of you sit in the vantages that you have, what do you think is the biggest factor that honestly determines whether a region can become a high-performance startup ecosystem? And what excites you about Seattle's place in that world today? So Earl, let's start with you. Welcome.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thanks for having me here as a Nasdaq milestone maker alumni. It's always nice to connect with the center. I reflect on my role, at least my role as a founder. So I'm a former founder, I'm an investor, and I lived in the Seattle region for the past 2 years, and I shuttled between Silicon Valley and Seattle multiple times. And I think the elements, what makes a great ecosystem boils down to maybe two or three things. One of them is really this notion of ambition, right? Ambition of the region, but also ambition of the people in the region to kind of scale large companies. The second one is, I call it exposure to problems or exposure to a disruption or a trend. And that's just all around you and people talking about it. And then the last one, which to be honest, I think the Seattle region has I don't say unfair advantage, but an advantage that definitely should be taken care of is the talent piece, where once you have the ambition and the exposure, you need people to execute it. And I think Seattle has those three elements today.
Amazing. And or please take just a moment and share about the work that you're leading right now, your startup or your investor work, whichever you'd like to share with the audience who's joining.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So, talking about the Seattle side. So I worked in Microsoft for the past couple of years. Now I'm actually working for Amazon in their startup and venture capital division. But then by heart, I'm a founder at heart. So I built a startup during Milestone Maker, raised, our seed pre-A, and then eventually we sold the company. So I also wrote the book during that founder journey to really inspire people to really ask that question of why even start a company. And that's kind kind of what I built with and wrote with Startup Mindsets, published by Penguin Random House. So.
I love that. And it speaks so dear to the purpose of exposure and the importance of how we all have a role in really showcasing what entrepreneurship can look like and where it lives in the hearts and streets that we call home. Carly, welcome. It's so great to have you here. Please, if you will share a little bit about your amazing background at JPMorgan Chase, what you do there, and also answering the question of what's exciting to you about Seattle right now, and also what do you think builds an incredible innovation economy?
Sure. So thanks for having me. So I'm Carly Kaiser. I was born and raised in Seattle, eventually came home and decided to build hopefully the most wonderful, impactful chapter of my life in Seattle. I started my career in venture and found my way to banking. And so my role at JP Morgan is I lead what we call the Innovation Economy Commercial Banking Team. Our job is to work on the banking as well as the capital strategy side for day one companies from incorporation well through maturity and exit. Kind of like to Earl's point, a lot of companies that are building along this journey go through very accelerated paths. And so that usually between like 7 to 12 years. And so we hope to be that long-term day one to end home and really with a lens on capital. So this is the one thing I really, really love. I get so inspired by getting to hang out with entrepreneurs like Earl. I think it is amazing. I don't have Earl's risk tolerance, so this is a great fit for me. So I kind of usually come at these things through a capital and talent lens. So I think one of the things that, having lived in a number of different cities, that Seattle, through a bunch of historical choices, has resulted in, it has a really strong density of talent. And that density of talent is usually within one specific sector. So, Seattle is really good at software. We're really good at AI. And that has really come through some of the choices that the city made a long time ago. And so it makes it easier for Earl to run around and have those kind of kismet moments where he's just bouncing around in a hallway and comes up with an idea and finds somebody else who also has technical expertise. And I think that is one of Seattle's differentiators when I look at how our companies go up against others around the region, is we have very technically deep founders as well as companies. We're solving very technical problems compared to other regions that might have higher densities in consumer companies or fintechs. We just have a very strong density of software engineers, which leads to one specific kind of company. I think the thing that Seattle continues to do better at year by year, we could always do better though, is we have people who are moving to the region who understand how to take early stage risk. And that wasn't always Seattle's strength. And that is what Seattle is like getting better at, I think. And so you need people who understand how to invest in early ideas in order to have an ecosystem that can support that day one check, that makes it so that that founder can leave whatever company they're at and go start their journey. But without those early check writers, it is really hard for somebody to take that first leap. And I think Seattle has done a really nice job in educating its angel investors about what does it mean to be an angel? How do you go diligence an early entrepreneur without putting them through too many paces of unrealistic expectations? And the community has really built a lot of those resources to put our angel community through that and make them better angel investors.
Love that. And I have a feeling we'll be talking a little bit more about the role of capital and early stage capital, especially through angels, in just a moment or two. Beta, welcome. Speaking of cultivating early stage talent, you are in such an exciting new role. Congratulations and welcome. Please share for everyone here joining a little bit about your background and also what you're most excited for, if I can even ask for just one, with Seattle and where it stands right now.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm looking forward to host you in July for the Nasdaq. Thank you for the invitation. So, and my background is I'm an entrepreneur. I come from a three-generation business in Mexico. I moved in Seattle in 2003, and I started very micro, small business selling jewelry and farmers markets, and I was able to grow my company to have a couple retail stores and wholesale and retail. And then I'm the founder of an organization called Ventures Nonprofit, who help people to start their own business with a very micro, like a micro-lender, CDFI. I've been very, very focused on working on startups, but very on the micro level. And the most recent job that I have, I was appointed by President Biden to be the Small Business Administration Regional Administrator for Region 10, covering Washington, Idaho, Oregon, and Alaska. And right now here, appointed by Mayor Wilson, very, very humble for the opportunity to lead this amazing work at the Office of Economic Development for the City of Seattle. So with that, I go with the question. So something that we are very inspired right now and that is working for Seattle is the proof of the public and private partnerships that are already working with us, with the AI House and the Seattle Climate Innovation Hub. So at the A House from March 2025 to December 2025, Office of Economic Development support to contribute more than 24 teams recruited to the incubators. We have raised more than $40.6 million under this effort. 119 events held through those incubators with more than 11,000 participants, 127 expert residents. And I will just say that's an opportunity for the community to come and help and brainstorm and have a place where they can just have all these conversations. And it's very important. Yes, capital is so important, but also a place for them that they gather and they brainstorm ideas. In 2025, at the Seattle Climate Hub, Innovation Hub, we have 5 companies raised nearly $5 million. The first cohort graduated from 5 to 6 companies. 8 companies planned for second cohort. 250 members to the co-working space, and more than 290 events hosted. And now we have new partners like Alaska Airlines that is supporting this effort. So definitely the private partnerships with the public, it's just really working, and we are really utilizing this to kind of how do we do more of this. And the single factor also, I will say that, the history of Seattle of being startup success with Amazon, Microsoft, the gaming companies, and so many more. It's a culture on our DNA as a Seattle, as I've been sharing with Earl and Katie. But Seattle has always been that kind of place that I personally feel very connected with this entrepreneurship mindset, taking risks in multiple levels. And we are really excited to continue to track talent and make sure that the world sees us as this place where you can start your business and be very successful, and then that you can have fun in our city, which is also a beautiful city that we're welcoming everybody to visit. So thank you for the opportunity to share, and thank you for the question.
Oh, no, absolutely. And I think between the three of you, you've already set us up for such a richness in the conversation today. We've talking about social capital. We're talking about knowledge capital. We're talking about access to capital, the actual financial engine that runs these businesses. And we're going to dive into all of those. To set the stage a little bit, when we looked at all of the metropolitan statistical areas across the US, and just for kicks and giggles, that number is 250. And we really dove into the top 10 and the top 20 to better understand what was driving these innovation engines differently, creating more efficiencies, creating more opportunities for all, really unlocking more innovation across a wide array of industries within the places that these locations were really driving in. There were a few common elements that really jumped out. Carly referenced angel capital, and I think it may be a little bit of the unsung hero that we really want to recognize today. In our top 20 MSAs, they actually account for 67% of all accredited angel groups in the entire United States. Now, the reason that that statistic really lands and sits meaningfully with me is, as Earl and as Beto have already talked about, you have to have a culture where people leaning in to say, how can I help in this crazy risk environment? What do you need? And what can I share in that process means everything. That balance of knowledge capital and early stage capital is a very important indication of opportunity that keeps talent happy, delighted, and excited to build in those places. And certainly when we look at what angel groups typically unlock, access to mentorship, access to syndication opportunities, access to early stage enterprise level deals, those things happen uniquely with angels. Another thing that was really true across all of these top 10 MSAs that I know we're going to dig into, and again, has already come up a little bit, is around the talent base. And what was true in all of these places was access to not just really strong R1 institutions, a Research One institution, but also really strong community colleges that were driving more exposure to entrepreneurship. And that allowed talent to rise. And we'll dig into talent conversation in just a little bit. But an inspiring moment to realize that it doesn't just live in one place. It really was democratized across the region and across all types of talent that's really needed to grow and scale incredible startup economies. And then the last thing that I want to talk to is policy. Forgive for a second, but we're going to go there. And it's in a really positive way. There's a thing called a sentiment analysis that is often conducted, and our friends at Penn State University looked across millions of bills to be able to understand what was happening uniquely in the state floor relative to entrepreneurship that was driving these economies forward differently in these metros that we're talking about. In every single place that shone in the top 20, at least 3 out of 5 times, there was a consideration of any bill that was being entered into discussion to understand what the implication, what the effect, and what the outcomes might be on the health of economic and the health of entrepreneurial endeavors versus sort of a sentiment index of 1 or 2 in other regions. That means that even when not directly addressing an entrepreneurial need, like within a tax bill or within a capital access bill, there was still a consideration of, is this helping our businesses do more? Is this helping them have a higher quality of life? Is this creating a positive environment where entrepreneurs can really rise and thrive within the regions? And I think that's another level that we'll try to get to with our questions today. So I'll get off of our soapbox for a minute, but if you're curious at all to dig into the research, we do encourage you to download this report, which you'll get to on our website at nasdaqcenter.org. All of that was made possible thanks to our incredible funders over the last few years making this available. And that was with JP Morgan Chase and Nasdaq. So again, thank you to them for making that available. All right, so let's dig into capital. Obviously, businesses need fuel to grow and scale. We've talked a little bit about that already. Beto, I want to start with you. Obviously, in this new position, one of the need areas is going to be to say, how do I bring in more capital to continue to grow and scale all these great businesses that are here, to attract and retain even more companies that want to build here? What do you think right now is one of the biggest pressing needs as you look at founder access to growth capital within the Seattle region? And then Carly, I'm going to come over to you and invite your thoughts from market expansion nationally and then regionally within Seattle too. But Beto, please, what are your thoughts on capital access in Seattle?
Yeah, so one thing that we really highly recommend, or what we've been doing, is combining panels of startups to really kind of come and share their running experience on how high-tech companies we are hearing them out and how they are really behind them and what do they need to continue to be successful in the region. Because in order for us to raise more capital and really advocate for that, we really need to know what are the needs from them. Definitely what I mentioned in my previous conversation, like investing in public-private partnerships, that's working really well for us. And maybe encouraging when we are building those public-private partnerships that they are not industry specific, that is a collaboration, is more like intentional space for it, like a house or climate innovation hub. And they ensure that it's an ecosystem partner. They are present support investors, advisors, other co-founders, and resources partners that can really are important for the startups to try to contribute to the local economy that we are really trying to do in our generation and positive effects. And encourage cross-sector collaboration is very important. So among key industries, for example, how can innovations like in clean energy, improve legacy manufacturing industries while also diversifying economy in a more resilient and more diversified. I think that's something that we are really working here in Seattle in making sure that diversifying our economy, it makes a huge impact for the long run and the being more equitable economy for our city and being more affordable city as well.
Yeah, I'm really grateful that you referenced the public-private partnerships. That has been something that we were very inspired with as we dug into a lot of the qualitative research that came out of Seattle and just really showcasing the relationships of intention, whether that is coming from philanthropy, enterprises, obviously venture, early stage capital, non-dilutive funding, debt financing. The list goes on, but there's a real like roll up the sleeves and try to figure out who are the parties that need to be present to make capital available relatively quickly, efficiently, and effectively for our founders. They shouldn't have to be the ones that are the front line of trying to figure it out day in and day out. How can we make it easier and more and less abrasive for them to A momentary glitch. I apologize, friends. Always good when a Zoom moment does that. That means it's a good conversation unfolding. Thank you, thank you, thank you for bearing with me on that. Carly, I'd love to jump over to you. First, does that resonate with you? Do you see some of these similar challenges and similar opportunities within Seattle? And then secondarily, maybe what do you hear from sort of entrepreneurs within the region that are their greatest needs or their greatest funding gaps right now?
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of what Beto said. I think that one of the things that is so my experience really comes from the technology sector or people that are often going to go raise outside capital, dilutive outside capital in order to kind of build these high growth businesses. So whether that's software, robotics, space, those kind of categories. One of the things that is a resounding theme, I think, is that we are blessed with a lot of entrepreneurial people, and there is not enough capital in our region to fund all of their ideas. And as a result, we spend a lot of our time making sure either that capital comes to Seattle and visits Seattle, or we are getting our founders there. I think one of the silver linings of COVID is I think a lot of investors now are less tied to place about where their investments are, but what they are looking for is, are their investments going to be able to hire the talent around them? And I think that is one of the things that Seattle can unequivocally say yes. You can go build your company as an early stage company, you can hire growth stage talent, and you can hire late stage talent. So that is an easier thing than for investors from out of the region to come in and say, great, Seattle has all of these things already going for it. I just need to get on that hour and 15-minute flight from San Francisco to get up to Seattle, and it's very easy to do a day trip. I spend a lot of my time in my role of getting capital from outside the region to Seattle. So I spend a lot of my time kind of at where Beto references Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence is this centrifuge for a lot of people to come and gather. And so when I know I have investors coming into town, I spend time to say, great, if you're coming in town for this meeting, I'm going to fill up your day with another 15 with the thesis of like, what do I want them to know about Seattle? And what is the themes I want them to walk away from? And oftentimes I want them to think about Seattle as like a deep infrastructure talent. We have 24% of the AI engineers in the country sit in Seattle. So we have some, Blue Origin is based here. So if you want to go build a space company, you should do it in LA, but maybe you should do it in Seattle too. So we're always trying to there is such a strong pull in our world to one specific city in the country that we're always helping to remind people that there are other great places to build. And Seattle has all of the elements to do that. But it does take an inordinate amount of effort on our founders' part to be loud. I will say one of the things that we coach our founders on a lot, Seattle is entrepreneurial, but it is also a modest city. We don't talk about ourselves very well. And I have to frequently coach up our founders to say, I need you to go be boisterous and loud about why you deserve this capital because there is finite resources. And I need you to go help make the case about why it's you now in this moment in Seattle.
I'm really pleased that you actually spoke about that because I fear and I feel that when we dug into a lot of our hidden gems, that humility is kind of ingrained a little bit into them. And so that invitation to be bolder, to be more boisterous, to be these change agents in the world of sharing and showcasing why they're building where they're building is really important. It's a great reminder. Thanks for that. Carly, I'm going to stay with you, and I'm also going to go a little off script now that I know where Earl is working to invite this next question. We often talk about the 800-pound gorillas in the room. I think Seattle's got some of the best and the brightest 800-pound gorillas in the room, literally with these amazing anchor institutions, Amazon, Microsoft, the list goes on as we've shared. I'd like to know what your thought is, Carly, to stay with you first, though, on whether or not these anchor institutions are actually maybe seeding the change of venture climate within Seattle that's just continuing to draw and attract. Obviously, we know those that get acquired have this venture mindset, want to stay building when they fall in love with the place. But do you think we're taking advantage of the anchor institutions in the way that we should be within Seattle? Is there more we could be doing? And what inspires you about what the anchor institutions are actually making possible within the Seattle region?
So I think we have two really large anchor institutions in the world of tech, and both of them have done a really thoughtful job of organizing themselves to be startup friendly. So they have entry points for both of their organizations that are specific for startups. They even use it in their names. It's like Microsoft for startups, AWS for startups. So it's like very obvious, very easy. And for entrepreneurs who might not have come from that lineage, it can be a little bit overwhelming to say, Amazon has how many tens of thousands of employees? How would I even access Amazon? How would I even know how to leverage the tools that are there? And so what they have done in a really elegant solution is made themselves very accessible and very available. They are also very visible in the community, and I think that really matters. So both of those teams, you see them out at almost every event, and so they are very approachable. So for a first-time founder, which is where most of our founders come from, we want that to be a place where they can walk up to an Earl and say, I know you just did this already. Like, can I buy you a coffee? Get your advice. Earl then can help them navigate an Amazon by way of example. But I think that has been one of the best gifts that they have given our community. And it's a national program, not just for Seattle, but on the ground locally, it has made those behemoths feel accessible.
It's that wonderful ripple up effect. I love that. And Earl, as we know now, you are that incredible face person that is opening doors, helping other founders out. What are you inspired by with the role of anchor institutions in Seattle? And how are these programs really creating new opportunities for new entrepreneurs within the region at large?
Yeah, so I think, I reflected on this. Actually, I moved from Connecticut to Seattle 2 years ago. And I definitely felt the influence of I call it the grandfathers, if not the older brothers and sisters of tech, right? Obviously, Microsoft, Amazon, it's still both founder-led companies. But I think what is the contribution really, and maybe a blueprint for other regions, is that it then becomes a best-in-class talent magnet. So that you have the best AI scientists that will move to Seattle. You have the best business developer that will move to Seattle. Will they be entrepreneurial? Maybe yes, maybe no. But if they do, then that's basically then an ecosystem in itself that people can take advantage of. But for me, the most exciting thing is that you actually have world-class experts of the company that you want to build in your backyard. So as an entrepreneur myself, like I don't necessarily need to also talk to just other entrepreneurs. In fact, if I have a problem of scaling, a problem of even HR, a problem of capital, like I need other people that are working in this best-in-class institution to tell me how they did it at the big leagues. And that's something that Seattle has, and it's something that Seattle should definitely double down or triple down on. It's like you don't want all the engineers or all the business people in Amazon or Microsoft to leave their jobs, but you want them to be involved in working with the people that want to leave their jobs, right?
Yeah, no, that's really astute. That idea of an invitation to scale up by those who are working in those leagues and can really help demystify what that process looks like without necessarily leaving and go joining the startup. Very, very helpful. Beto, obviously we're hearing here great relationships with incredible anchor institutions that are unlocking opportunities within the region. Are there other relationships that you would equally like to see made possible for startups within Seattle? Are there other types of institutions that you think are not always talked about in this way, but are really doing the needed work that is creating capacity, awareness, and mentorship for the startups of the region?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. We have that's kind of like the partnership with the private and public sector. Really, like what are those other corporations who want to make thoughtful investments with academia, with universities, with workforce development. So how do we kind of do that? And with our city. So how do we as a city have the responsibility to be the connector, the glue, that making sure that what do we hear from these startups and this talent on what are those relationships that we need to build. And that's how we have this innovation hub and the AI hub, because we hear all those stories. And from there, what we gather and what we collect is like, what else other organizations that we need to build relationships on top of those institutions that we've been very grateful to have them for all the talent and all the investments that they have in our city. But at the same time, what are the other opportunities that we're hearing from the entrepreneurs? So those are the ones that I can think. And then philanthropy is another one, like how do we kind of bring them into this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Carly talked a lot about this earlier, and I really appreciated this, the idea of moving beyond one's own backyard, so to speak, to actually cultivate relationships and raise awareness beyond the region of opportunity and the flow of capital into the region too, which I think, everyone wants to know where the great talent is, and plane rides and train rides and virtual Zoom meetings make anything possible to connect these days. So being able to take advantage of that, but being able to home in on the need above just the solution is super great advice too. I think we'll all walk away stronger with that today. Like, hone in on the need, hone in on the relationships that are missing today, and then go cultivate those relationships and raise awareness around the opportunities that live within those regions. That's really great. Um, Sometimes, every once in a while, I think Earl's already sort of talked about this. There are those proverbial brick walls that we hit, right? It can be like just a struggle in raising the next level of capital, or it can be just a struggle in like not being in a market that may be deemed like the place where you quote unquote should be. Earl, I'm going to start with you, and then I'm going to open it up to the panel. I'd love to hear from you on those hard days or on those challenging days, perhaps when people are like, why are you building it there? What keeps you there? What makes you go, it's worth it. It's worth it because I get the best coffee, or I get the best whatever food, I get the best music, I get the best filled moments. And of course, I'm putting words in your mouth when I say that. But whatever it might be, what is it that keeps you wanting to build in Seattle? And then what advice do you have for founders to be able to like take that and honor that within their own region and know that it's worth going the distance, even on those hard days?
Yeah, I guess my wife always says that Seattle has some of the best coffee. Uh, um,
Cheers to that. I'm the
yeah,
coffee drinker here, so I
yeah.
get that one.
But in all seriousness, the it's again the blessing and the curse of being Seattle is that you know you have so much talent, right? You have so much talent, and the exciting part of being an entrepreneur in Seattle is that you always have someone there that can maybe talk about the same problem as you, but then also think about someone who talked about and done that problem 5 years ago, either in a large company or even as a founder. I mean, if you go inside of an Amazon or a Microsoft, which I was in, you'll find a lot also of ex-founders. Maybe at the life stage they don't want to start a company yet, but they're there, right? So that's something that at least it excites me. I think it is combination really of the talent there, both outside entrepreneurs, but then entrepreneurial people inside these large companies. I think this notion, the best of both worlds, where you are in geographically like striking distance of larger capital allocations if needed. Let's say if you raise series, B, C, D, you know that you can fly to the valley within a 1.5 hour distance. That's super important because you want to know that I just need to go. A lot of my colleagues, entrepreneur colleagues, literally fly into San Francisco on 8 a.m. and they take the last flight with the whole meetings of Series B and C meetings, right? Like that's super important. And then the last one really that I think is exciting is that I think the culture and the people, it's just a diverse background. I know it's heavily in tech, but then you meet people who love art and music, people who are, in agriculture, people who are in, Costco's there, so like, retail. So it's also this, heterogeneous mix of people. And to be honest, that's where interesting ideas also come from, right?
I love that. Oh, I absolutely love that. And I think you've touched on such meaningful reasons to continue the build and build where you want to, build where you're inspired to, build where the opportunity is for you. And that's a personal choice and one that's made possible with a lot of the ingredients that we're addressing here. Carly and Beto, I'd love to invite you to answer perhaps one of the greatest myths that's existed in modern day history of entrepreneurship, and that is, should we even be trying to solve like keeping great founders in a location, or is it just a sign of things are going great when they move to other regions? Would love your perspectives to see if we're, have a synthesis of thoughts around that one. Carly, can I invite you to go first?
As somebody who wants Seattle to be a place where founders want to build, I think it is like our duty to try to make this a place where they want to build, sell, and then go build again. And I think that one of the things that I've lived in other communities where we were earlier on in our entrepreneurial journey, and I think one of the most interesting things for the entrepreneurial experience is if you can be an employee of a company who has gone through its growth and its sale moment, and you can see what it looks like to be, a part of that experience of that growth. That is where your next generation of entrepreneurial talent comes from, right? Because they've had a lived experience with it. I think Seattle is farther. We're not at San Francisco's point of maturity, but we are on our way where you have kind of that ripple effect. And so I want those founders, once they have had that experience, to look around and say, that's my co-founder right there, and I can get that part of talent. And if the talent doesn't exist here, that's fine. Hopefully it's that minority piece, but because of the democratized way we can all connect now, that like it's fine to hire somebody in a different location. But I firmly believe that Seattle has all the ingredients that we would want this to be a place where people want to live, work, enjoy life, all of those kind of things. And when you stand on the pier at the Allen Institute and the other day I had an investor from out of town, and like orcas are jumping and the ferry boats are going by and like the sun is setting over the mountains, and you're like, where else would you want, like, I challenge you to tell me where else you'd want to go build right now. And so there's a lot we have going for us. And so I personally believe that it should be our mission to try to create this to be a place where you want to build multiple companies and have philanthropic investments of your life and all of these other ways that you want to contribute to the community.
Absolutely love that, Carly. And I think probably you've got hundreds of people now that are like, what does it look like for me to move to Seattle? Beto, let's jump over on your side. From your perspective, obviously retention of great talent is I'm sure part of what gets you excited every day when you get up. But how do you think about this challenge of like, do we have all the ingredients that can really keep and grow and scale up all the founder talent? And is that the solvable problem that you're excited to try to figure out in this role that you're taking on?
Yeah, definitely. And I wanna echo what Earl and Carly said about like the nature, the beauty of the nature, the quality of life. We are very competitive compared to other places to be a startup. And then once a founder mark through a startup here, this region is really a place where you can scale your business. And that's kind of what we are working at the Office of Economic Development. How do we create more of that to keep the talent here? I think something that Seattle is doing is to start clean tech and Seattle Climate, the innovation hub, and how we move this AI house into the different phases. How do we diversify our key industries? How do we are kind of like diversifying our economy in terms of something that we are experiencing and working is workforce training and placement. So not only working on creating the future of our talent, but how do we help it to place that? And how do we create those strategies? And then it's working really well in the investments that we are doing in terms of keeping our talent. What is the future workforce that is needed? What is the pathways? What is the employees? What is the lead models? What is the innovation and the diversification that we need in terms to keep the talent here in a region? So that's kind of like what we are working on the Office of Economic Development across other partners as well, with the Department of Commerce, with the Port of Seattle. It's a ecosystem. That's how I see it. Is definitely the city of Seattle is like very important, but also we see it as a region. I'm a regionalist, and I want to make sure that we co-create and collaborate across the region. And we're on that path, and I feel very proud of being in this position because it's pivotal for Seattle. We are not San Francisco, we're on our way there, but also how can we make sure that we learn the lessons from San Francisco, and in that way we can just are more proactive instead of reactive on how do we keep our talent, how do we create a more affordable city, how do we create the systems and the infrastructure. We already have the plus of the nature and the beautiful sceneries that we have and the art and culture and the diversity on that. It's about like how do we continue building and being proactive into this place to make sure that we have a very strong ecosystem for startups and founders.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I really appreciate the thoughtfulness around just looking at history and what we can learn. Obviously, that was the whole point of really doing research, not for research's sake, but really to drive forward more of an awareness of blueprints. It's a relatively short history in modern day entrepreneurship, 50, 60 years, if you will. But there's still been a lot of micro experiments that have been run in different places, in different spaces that we can actually all learn from. So I love this regional effect of saying, okay, when we go through that discovery process together, we're all going to get smarter, and all of our regions are going to rise as a result of that. And of course, that's why we're honored to be with NLC on this journey as well, is to say, let's not keep those as best kept secrets. Let's make sure that they're available and accessible so that all regions can continue to grow and build that way. We've talked a lot about talent in a variety of ways. We've talked about the builders and the critical build economy, right? If you will, the people that have the ideas, the people that are excited to take that leap, have an environment of support uniquely in Seattle that they feel they can take that risk with, early capital that's there to support them, inspire them, give them that first belief check. Earl, I'm going to come to you first, and I'm going to say, and then there's that moment when founders are ready to hire. And those hires sometimes are tech. A lot of the time they're tech talent if it's in the tech space, and sometimes they're business, and sometimes they're finance. How do you feel about access to the employment talent that's needed within the Seattle region? Are there any gaps that you've observed? Do you think that what showed up for us in the research relative to, really a wide array of exposure to entrepreneurship from community colleges and the, incredible university system and beyond is what is making it possible for those early hires, those first 20, 30 employees to be ready to take that risk with each startup that starts in Seattle?
Yeah, I think the most important thing as you build a company is first this, the not just the founders but the founding team, the people below you that are I call really is how to attract the world experts that then can build the next level bench, right? Because if you're going to build a company, imagine you want the head of AI to come from AWS or Azure or GCP or Anthropic or OpenAI. If you want the head of HR, someone who ran large teams or scaled it from 2 to 50 or 2 to 100 in other places, right? In others. So I think, and then that's where I guess you want to hire after that. I call it the people who are passionate about the mission, but not necessarily have the exposure or the skills yet, right? And that's, I think, the role, let's say, of the top institutions in the PNW, community college, of like people basically saying, yeah, you know what, I might not yet know how to build what you're building, but I am committed to your mission, and I will work the hardest, and also learn from the people that you hired. I think is the key ingredients of what I think is that ecosystem. I mean, not to also just put everything rosy. The hardest part also, to be honest, is to attract that next level hires. Imagine going to someone that is in a 4-year vesting schedule and saying, hey, by the way, can you leave that job and work with me in a, seed stage startup? To be honest, that's just the harder conversation in Seattle than in San Francisco, right? But that's also the hardest conversation, to be honest, and all over, I think, the world, right? Right, the area. So I think that's just, I think, where a little bit of the gap is, that I think all of us that is maybe not in the Bay Area, how do we get into the psychology of attracting people that might have what I call this, low risk, stable jobs in large companies, to actually then take the leap to join a fast growing startup, is, I think, the gap that all of us also have to reflect on.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And obviously goes into that entrepreneurial mindset that you were referencing earlier on. And I think much appreciation for Beto's very responsible method of saying, it comes to cost of living, and it comes to like really making as much distance as we can for an entrepreneurial sabbatical to be possible when people say, yeah, I'm interested in that. Like, I'd like to. Is there a way that I can make this work financially? And we do still understand that that's still a little bit of a luxury term for a lot of population base, and something that if we want to, I think in this current age, make it possible for more people to participate, we're going to have to continue to try to figure that out and really, get creative on what those solutions need to look like, and ways to partner together thoughtfully to do the right work beside the right people in that process, and really hopefully create generational wealth for a whole new world of amazing humans in this outcome. So thanks for reminding us of that, Earl. I mean, it's kind of a nice segue, and I'm mindful of time. I knew that today was going to fly with this great conversation with all of you. But a lot of the work that the center does, and a lot of what I'm inspired by all of your backgrounds, is really creating more capacity and creating more economic opportunity for all to participate. And yet our under-resourced founders face a lot of challenges. Many of them are systemic barriers. I would love to invite your thoughts, and it's an open conversation for anyone who'd like to participate. What do you find is one of those most frustrating, barriers that is present that you would like to sort of get in and grapple with? And it could be on this talent lens that we're already kind of talking about here, or it might be something else. Or flip it on the head and say, is there a model that you're inspired by within your region locally, or even at a national level, where you're like, wow, when we do this, a lot of those barriers that have prevented people from participating seem to be going by the wayside. So we want to see more of that. Again, whether that's capital, whether that's exposure, whether that's talent. We just love your thoughts on how do we get more participation by more people who we need to solve our problems in this world, and obviously create economic dynamism as a result. Who wants to start?
I will say that when we are supporting a startup and grow ecosystem, it's a bigger job than just one city, as I say, or one municipality. I think when we are thinking about what is the impact that it could have in a region, so that, like, for example, recently in New York, a stat passed their Empire AI law investment. The Empire AI law is 400 million private public investment to advance AI research and development. These kinds of public-private, I keep talking about private partnerships on state levels, moves the needle forward on startup and in the state, not just in the AI startup, but also on the competition for the funding. So if we can start thinking about how do we do those more private, public investments, and what is the ripple effect for our region, and definitely, I mentioned it before, it's not only under the pressure of one municipality or one city, it's more across the entire sector or the city, the state. So that's something that I feel very inspired, and then we can learn from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, and for me, what I've seen in other states is how do you unlock the first checks from a policy, right? Like imagine, I used to be in Connecticut and they had, angel investor. Maybe in Washington State they also had one, but there's basically a tax deduction for high net worth individuals that invest in high risk ventures. Or even actually, even ventures that are, SMEs. I think that's something that we need to do, because it's very scary to leave a job. But if you know that you have backers for your idea, it's easier to leave and take a risk on yourself and for the team to do it. So imagine if, other people in your town, in your state, in your region will back the next founders that come from that region, that grew up there. I think that's a magical thing. That will inspire the next generation of people. If you yourself, even if you didn't necessarily start a company, but even if you're an executive of a large company, or you did well as an entrepreneur, SME, or a tech founder, to give back to the next generation. But at the same time, from a policy perspective, if I can even write it off, it is a double extra push for me to take that risk and use my personal money to back a founder, right? So that's what I think I've seen other states do. So
yeah, absolutely. More participation from more capital allocators, and then that circular economy, right? By being able to see and advocate and shout from the rooftops, hey, look at these amazing founders who are doing well here. That's going to continue to drive more people to say, maybe I can do this too. Like I should go talk to them. I should go figure out how they did that. And by having this supportive system that you're really weaving into the fabric and the foundation of Seattle, and obviously has been there for so long, but you just continue to invest in it, continue to strengthen it. You're really removing a lot of those barriers and, helping to, I think, diminish the imposter syndrome that a lot of people fear about. Like, I can't do this. I don't feel that I have that support needed to be able to take that leap. So thank you for the work that you're all leading in that space. All right, time is marching by. I've got one last closing question, and then I'm going to see if I can pop into one or two of these great questions that have been coming in from the audience. Thank you so much for doing that. And it's really this. What is the signal or indicator that tells you personally that Seattle is truly succeeding, not just as a place that can build and start great founders, but a place that can keep great founders building and wanting to be part of the circular economy that we're talking about? So, Carly, I'm going to start with you, then Beto, and then Earl round us out. How do you know Seattle is worth it? It's all this investing that you're doing is paying off, and it's doing great things.
I think it's when you don't have to defend why Seattle. And I don't think we're still there yet. But I think for especially in the world where there's one particular city, San Francisco, that gets a lot of attention. I think there's often like, well, why wouldn't you just go to San Francisco? So I think that, and I would say we are on our way there, not fully there. But when we can fully say like, that's not a question that's a part of the popular questions that founders get, I think that's we'll know. Yes, we've checked a big thing off our list.
Love it. It's no longer needed to be defended. It's just known. It's just in the world. I love that. Beto, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I echo and feel that we are also making very strategic investments as the city, with really being very entrepreneurial and very pro this work, and we are still very competitive compared to the other markets, in terms of cost of living and the experience of living here. So that's how I see that. Is like, we have proof there is a lot of success in this region, and people want to continue moving here to do this work. So and we will continue, that's my commitment, to continue making these investments and making sure that we hear the needs of these founders, and how do we support them, and how do we connect them with the resources that they need.
Very good. We're glad you're doing that. Earl, what are your thoughts?
Sure, and I'll wrap it up with a contrarian view, which is, I don't think ecosystems should try to stop people from leaving, but the real metric if your ecosystem is thriving is if people come back.
Mm-hmm.
So if they, let's say, start with an idea in Seattle, first check, they end up moving somewhere else to scale, and then when they want to be the next Amazon or Microsoft or Costco or Boeing, they then want to say, I will plant roots of my company and scale it from 100 people to 100,000 people back in Seattle, because that's where it all started. That is a true measure if your ecosystem is thriving.
I love that. The culture and the connection always to the place that inspired the build. So
Exactly.
good. Okay, I promise I try to get at least one in, and it's a good one. There have been a few people that have been touching on culture, like how do you actually keep culture of an entrepreneurial mindset real? What is your advice for like how to break that down? Like, what is entrepreneurial mindset? What do you think it looks like or builds? Beto, do you want to share in your mind what culture of entrepreneurship means in Seattle?
Yeah, a place where you can take risks, a place where you can be okay, try again, and then we'll have to support you. We're gonna cheer for you. A place where we are building infrastructure, and places where you can gather. There is access to capital, the technical assistance, the training. There is like people who really, you say something about the imposter syndrome earlier, and how we can just make sure that these entrepreneurs, that these innovators, that these founders want to try over and over, because starting a business is very risky, and then we want to have a cultural place that is safe to do that, and it has to come with the storytelling of how we are being supporting those entrepreneurs. So for me, that's a culture repeat and on multiple levels. So that's kind of what I also want to continue doing, and my role of how do we have that place to make sure people feel like welcome and supported, and then Seattle is the best place to start a business, play, go on the outdoors and enjoy our region.
Absolutely. What a perfect note to end this on. To our friends joining, thank you so much. To our panel, you've been exceptional. We couldn't have done it without you. Thank you for breaking down a lot of those uncertainties and getting to the heart of what makes Seattle great, but also inspiring us how to bring that into our own regions and to really manifest this in all of the places that we want to. Team, thank you so much for letting us be here today. And Colin, I'll let you wrap us up.
Well, thank you, Nicola. What a wonderful panel. Beto, Carly, thank you so much for joining us, sharing insights. It looks like we had a Zoom moment and Earl dropped, but what a wonderful conversation. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. We hope you found this valuable. Keep a lookout for the follow-up with any resources, materials in this recording. But again, thank you to our esteemed panelists, and thank you, Nicola. We look forward to welcoming everyone on this call back online soon. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.